All right. So I want to tell you a story. And this one should be kind of evident in my current surroundings, which look a lot like this. So I live, you can see, on a Christmas tree farm in the Northeast Kingdom of Vermont. Why in my videos so far you've seen Christmas trees and snow. Oh, I got snowshoes on today, by the way. So hopefully I'll be able to catch my breath a little easier. Make sure it's finding me again. There we go. Or keep my breath, rather. Anyway, Christmas tree farm. It's where I live with my family. I don't want any stolen masculinity here. I don't actually work on these Christmas trees. So I own the house and the land, and there are lots of guys who come out, not lots, only a few actually, that come out and shape the trees. They get little they have these little blades like machetes, and they'll come out and they'll tape them to their wrists, right? So they have these blades that come off their wrists, cool looking. And they walk up and down the aisles and they chop the trees into a cone shape. And they do this for all 15,000 of the trees out here. It's pretty impressive to watch. So, sure it's following me again. So, I just admitted I don't know a damn thing about Christmas trees. The hell am I doing on a Christmas tree farm? Glad you asked. So my family and I, lived in Houston, West Houston in particular, near Katy. And I hated it, always did. Went to high school there. I just never cared for the sameness. You know, like every house was a variant brick color, but same type of bricks. Variant paint color, but from the same palette. It was all very uniform. And I hated it. But heard and talked to people who loved it, it was comforting, I think, to have every house the same. You know, exactly 2 trees in the yard. Bushes always at a certain place. But it bled over, I think, into other parts of their life. You know, like they all drove the same cars. Like there was always either a Ford F-150 or a Ram 1500 in the driveway. That was it. I was lying about this being easier, by the way. This is harder. Anyway, suburbs, sameness. Hated it. We moved out there because we were planning on having a family. Like, we bought a house out there. We lived in the city for a while. And then, that's interesting. 1 second. There's a track through the powder. Let's see if we can get an idea of what it was. Looks bunny-sized to me. Maybe bunny-sized? Can't tell. Maybe somebody in the comments will be able to tell. It's all white, so it's going to be hard to see that track that goes off into the into the trees over there. Anyway, back to me. Suburbs. Moved out there. Want to have a family. So we did, and we were the dual income, no kids people, and the dinks next door. I think we were kind of viewed a lot like the next door neighbors from Christmas Vacation. We were I don't know, Margot. Us. Because we didn't have kids. Then we did eventually have Daphne throughout 3-4 years. Never really got any closer to our neighbors, but the rest of it made sense, you know, the backyards, do you have a kid, live in the suburbs? Makes sense. A couple years into that, we got the diagnosis that Daphne had level 2 autism. And, you know, I'll make another video someday about what that was like and what that felt like, but it's enough today. We got that diagnosis. And we went from being the Todd and Margot to kind of I think we're kind of a pitied special ed parents. Shouldn't feel good either. And over this time, well, then a third thing happened, COVID. And so we all went on lockdown. So now I hate the suburbs, and I'm stuck in a house in the suburbs all day. Yeah, I did work from home before, but I could leave and go in the city. I could leave and go do stuff. Now, me in a suburban house, and I was miserable. And my poor wife had to hear about how miserable I was all the time and how much I hated it. But during COVID, I would get off work and decompress, right? And I'd put on, I was like this close to Enya, right? I would put on YouTube videos of babbling brooks or snowy forest landscapes. Snowy forest landscapes. And try to decompress after being at work all day, well, working all day in my office. Then what at the time felt like a very existential threat of COVID for us. This was early on, before we knew a lot about it. And of course, being parent to at that time, 4-year-old little girl with autism who's nonverbal. All stressors. So I watch videos to calm down. Kind of have a break between work and family. And at one point, the YouTube algorithm chose a farmer in Vermont as one of the recommended videos. And this is a dude who at the time was moving from DC to a farm in Vermont. And I watched a bunch of his videos and he seemed like a good guy. I was like, you know what? There's an idea. Maybe I'll look at Vermont. So I hit the Zillow, started looking at places, get a general idea. Like, you know, it's not prohibitively expensive to buy some land in Vermont right now. This was 5 years ago. Tree. 4 years ago. 2021. So, different world we're in now. I'm not rolling in that kind of bank. So we talk about it, we look into it some more, and finally we just decide that's it. In the immortal words of Spider Jerusalem, I hate it here. I've got to go. I've got to get back to the mountain. So we decide we're going to put our house on the market. We do that the 2nd of January in 2021, thinking we'll have some time, open house. No, somebody came in the next week and offered $30,000 more than what we were asking, and they were going to pay cash. But we had to GTFO immediately before the end of the month, so we had 3 weeks to move out. We had nowhere to go yet. So I called a moving company, packed up all our stuff, put it in a tractor trailer, moved it to Brattleboro, Vermont, a long way from Katy, Texas. And we had still never once set foot in Vermont. Had no idea if that's actually where we would end up. But that's where our stuff was going. And so we spent a couple of months living with family. Because the house sold sooner than we thought. And shortly after the big Texas snowstorm of 2021, it shut the whole state down. That Easter, we hopped in the car and we drove to Vermont. During the time we were there, I booked an Airbnb in Canaan, Vermont, which is in the far northern border. It's basically occupied Canada. That's a less funny joke right now, given our current political environment. Right on the border of Canada. And we drove up there. It took us 5 days to get here. Again, Daphne having autism and sensory processing disorder, we required a lot of stops. I had to find parks throughout the entire trip to make sure that she could get out and get some movement in and some proprioceptive input. And so we get to Vermont. We drive through this town called Burke. It's a cute little town, as a matter of fact. It's right there. And that's it, please. Thank you. And when we passed Burke, up until then, it had all been fun and adventure and had been great and yeah, work, but at that point, shit was getting real. And there was nothing between Burke and Canaan. It was desolate. Like forest, 2 lanes, And that's it. And now I had come from Houston. So being that far removed from anything that even remotely resembled civilization was, at the time, spooky as hell. What if something happened to the car? We got flat. Could AAA make it to us? Would we freeze to death out here? Very different person now. At the time, that was a concern. We get to Canaan, we find our apartment. It's fine. It's fine. Not great. Not our 3,000 square foot suburban home that we just left, but fine. The next day, we get up and I'm thinking, man, I'm tired. I just drove 5 days. Maybe we take it easy. Maybe take a day and just hang out here. And I take a look at the apartment that we're in and go, what the hell am I going to do in here? So instead, I flip open Zillow again. And I see this farmhouse. It's in our price range. And I start looking at the pictures, and it turns out, man, it's a Christmas tree farm. So I decide, let's not just hang out and waste a day. Let's get in the car and go look at it. So we do. Wasn't that far. It was near that little town of Burke that we kind of liked. And we take a look. We do the stealth run, right? You go up to the house before you contact the realtor. Just make sure it's not completely jacked up. And it wasn't. So we call the realtor. She gives us a walk through. And my wife essentially says this checks all the boxes of the stuff that we're looking for. And for me, the main box was to look out the window of my house and to step out the front door and not see anyone else or anyone else's house. Because where we were, if you looked out any window in the house, you either saw a brick wall, or if you were on the second floor, a sea of black asphalt shingles in little points, as far as you could see, into the distance. Sometimes if you were close, like in my office, it was 12 feet, and then a wall of shingles. And I hated that too. And so one of the things I was looking for was the ability to look out our window and not see anyone else or their house. And this checked that box too. So we put in an offer. Only house we looked at. And the owner accepted the offer. And so we called our storage area in Brattleboro, where our stuff had been sitting for 2 months. Had them ship it to what was now our new house in Vermont. We called the local schools, got them, our daughter enrolled, explained everything to them. And then on June 4th, when we had left Houston on Easter Sunday, we moved our things into what was our new home in Vermont on a Christmas tree farm in the Northeast Kingdom. So why am I telling the story? Again, I point to a lot of it, except that, we didn't have, when we left Houston, there was no plan that was etched in stone. There was nothing had been inked in an itinerary. We were just trusting that this world is built, our world now, is built for people to move around in it. And that we would be capable of figuring out our way and making decisions on the fly. And we were very right about that. In fact, if we had tried to make a solid itinerary, wouldn't have worked. Would have freaked out. Nothing necessarily went to plan. And yet, it all worked out great. Daughter is super happy up here. She's got a great group of classmates that love her. My wife and I love waking up to this every day. Even our chickens over here seem relatively happy. Hopefully they're in frame over there. They're not super thrilled about the fact that it's January in Vermont. But you know what? August will make up for that. Anyway, if we tried to plan this out, we never could have. But just being willing to roll with the punches and kind of ride the wave along, everything worked out just the way it was supposed to. So maybe that'll help somebody out there. They're thinking about making a big move of their life. Go ahead. It'll probably be fine. All right, that's it. I'll have another story next week. Thanks.